As you begin working in Excel, you're going to notice that at the top you have the ribbon, and on that ribbon are all sorts of buttons. And what you're going to discover as you work in Excel is that it is one of the most expansive, most flexible programs you could possibly want to use. So today we're going to just take a peek at some of the highlights of the buttons on that ribbon. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's look at Excel and its ribbon. As we look at today's example, right now it's just a blank workbook, and running across the top is a gray bar that is called the ribbon, and it starts in the upper left and goes clear over to the far right. And as we look at it, we can see that there are all sorts of buttons on this ribbon. And each one of the buttons has a specific job that it does. Now, there are so many that they need to be organized and categorized to help us find what we want to use. So, if we look in the upper left of the ribbon, we have a File tab that is kind of separate from the other tabs. So generally, when we start working with Excel, Home is where we are going to spend a lot of our time. To the right of that, we have the Insert tab, and then the Page Layout tab, and the Formulas tab, and Data, and Review, and View. And then there may even be some other tabs over at the right, depending on the version of Excel that you have. But we're going to start with the Home tab. And as we move from left to right, we will find that the buttons that we use the most, the tabs that we use the most, are probably on the left. And then as we go to the right, not quite as much. Starting on the left, there is the clipboard group, and there's 4 buttons there, but they each have something to do with the clipboard, which is a place in the memory of the computer that holds information, and then you can draw that information out of the memory and place it someplace else. We have a font group that lets you deal with, well, the text and numbers and how they appear in your spreadsheet. You have an alignment group, and this has to do with all of the different numbers and letters and how they are arranged within a cell. Are they at the top or the bottom or centered? Then you have the number group, and this number group has to do with formatting numbers. Do they have decimal places? Do they have commas? All sorts of different ways that you can format numbers. And then we get into more advanced kinds of places within the Home tab, the Styles group. And you may decide to say, okay, with conditional formatting, if a cell has certain contents, I might decide to change how that particular cell is formatted, or I might decide to design my own cell styles. To the right of that, we have a cells group, and you can see that here we can insert, delete, or format cells. To the right of that, the editing group is quite an interesting group. It has a lot of variety in what it does. You can sort, you can filter, you can find, you can even add in simple formulas, but they all have something to do with editing. And then on my ribbon, I even have some other buttons that you may not have on yours. And now let's go back to the far left to the clipboard group, where we have really important buttons that you're going to use a lot. We have copy, then we have cut, which is also called move, and then we have paste. So we can take whatever we have copied or cut and paste it someplace else in our workbook. We also have this interesting button in the lower right, the Format Painter. But let's see how this would work. If I decide that I want to copy a number, I simply click where that number is, go to the Copy button, click on it, then click where I want to paste that information and click on Paste. And there is the copy. You'll find that when you use Excel and you copy or cut, that you will get what is called either a marquee or marching ants, and I can press escape to remove those or simply go on down to the next item. Now I might decide that I want to cut this number and move it someplace else. So I select the number, I go up to the scissors in that clipboard group, and then I'm going to click where I want to move it, click on paste, and I have moved that number. We might also decide to look at the clipboard and the Format Painter, which is this lower right button, which kind of looks like a paintbrush. I can look at text or numbers, and in this case I have a blue font and kind of a yellow background. I can click on that cell, go to the Format Painter, and then the format goes to the clipboard, and notice how my mouse changes into a plus sign with that paintbrush. Now I can click on other text where I want this particular formatting to go, click on it, and it copies the formatting. Now that is really powerful stuff, and that is just the first group within this particular tab on the ribbon. As we go to the next group, the font group, we can see that this all has to do with fonts. So I have some example text here, and right now it says I have Calibri font. I could change it to something else. I can change the size of that font. I can change the size of the font, not so scientifically, but simply clicking the big A to make it bigger or the small a to make it smaller. I can make the text bold or italics or underline. I can even add a border around that cell that I have selected. And I can add in fill color. Let me choose a light color here. And I can change the text color as well. And this is very easily done using the font group. The next group that you're most likely to use is the alignment group. And on the left-hand side, we can either arrange our text or numbers vertically within the cell or horizontally within the cell. So let me click and show. This is the vertical alignment here at the top, at the middle, at the bottom of the cell, or I can arrange it to the left, the middle, or to the right of the cell very easily. Now we have some other buttons in here that you might be interested in, but we also have this one for wrap text. So what it does is keep all sorts of information in the same cell. And that can be also an extremely great help, wonderful tool when you need it when you're working with a spreadsheet. Now, Merge and Center is something else that you may want to consider, but let's go ahead and look at the number group. Now, with the number group, we are simply formatting numbers, and we can look at that general drop down and see there are all sorts of ways that we can define numbers. But I'm going to click here in A14, and let's just look at some of the ways we can do this. So accounting, I can add in a $sign, a comma. I can add in just the comma format if I want to do that. I can, with these last two buttons, either increase or decrease the number of decimal places. So I'm going to decrease the decimal. I can also take a decimal number and change it into a percent. And this is all so easy to do within the number group. While we haven't looked at all of the buttons on this Home tab, I think you'll agree that there is a chance that you're going to be using these first buttons that we did look at quite a lot. And then as you go to the right, as predicted, you will use some of these other items. They just tend to be more intermediate and advanced in nature. Well, then let's go ahead and look at the Insert tab. And when we look at the Insert tab, it kind of starts off advanced with pivot tables, but there are some things here that you might also want to use even as a fairly new user of Excel. For example, you might decide to add in some pictures. And with pictures, we can insert pictures that you have taken and are on your computer, or you can even get some stock images or online pictures as well. A lot of people like to use shapes with Excel, and whether those shapes are used to create buttons that then run a macro, or whether they're just a nice basic shape for whatever reason, you can simply click on that shape and click and draw. And now you have this wonderful shape ready for you to use. You also have icons that are kind of fun to use. I'm just going to pick a first one here and insert it. And here I have my shape that then I can even colorize if I would like to do that. I can also add in some smart art and do some screenshots and then add them to my spreadsheet if I want to. To the right of that, we have charts. Creating a basic chart is really easy to do. All you do is select the information that you want to make into a chart, and then you go to this middle section, Charts, and determine how that should look. So let's just go to the first choice here of a column chart. And even here, I have all sorts of options of how that should look. And as soon as I open up the possibility of having a chart, then I'm already seeing here a preview of how that will look. Pretty amazing, isn't it? So easy to do, and it's all in that Insert tab. Now from here, you could even get into more advanced options of sparklines, filters. You might decide to create a link of some kind. So let's say that we want to put in my MCPL.org, and I want to define that as a link. I could come over to links and insert the link. Let me even put in my MCPL.org one more time and click OK. And now that will take me to our website. I can also put in comments if I'm sharing this workbook with someone and I want to make comments about how it looks, or maybe even comments to myself about remember to do this, or this isn't quite working right, that kind of thing. And then some word-like things with text, with headers and footers, and at the far right you can add in equations and symbols that aren't necessarily on your keyboard. I've now moved over to the Page Layout tab because this is something that is also very important and really helps you with a large spreadsheet in particular. And for the most part, you're going to look at this Page Setup group, the Scale to Fit group, and once in a while, the Sheet Options group. The other two groups, while they are very nice, for the most part, you're going to be using these three in the middle. So let's start by looking at the Page Setup group, which lets you adjust the margins. And you can have 1-inch margins, and then you can even have custom margins if you need to, say, go down to 1/4 of an inch all the way around. Orientation lets you change from portrait to landscape and back again, depending on how your spreadsheet is laid out. Size has to do with the page size, the sheet size. If you print at home, chances are you're printing a letter size paper, but there are all these other options if you need to. Now with Excel, you also can define a print area. If you have a really large spreadsheet, but you only want to print the first page, or even the first section of a spreadsheet, so that it might be the first 5 columns and the first 10 rows, something like that, you can set a print area and only that area prints, leaving the rest of the spreadsheet alone, but you have to actually clear the print area to print more than what has been defined. To the right of that, we have a breaks button that right now, since I don't have anything on this page, I can't define breaks, but this is where you can add in manual page breaks, which is occasionally highly important. And then this print titles lets you duplicate column headings and row headings on each successive page that is printed out. This becomes extremely important. To line up that information, it really helps to be able to repeat the headings of the rows and the columns. Now, the scale to fit is sort of interesting. You can change either the width of what you are printing or the height of what you are printing. And you can say, for example, I want to print one page, so even if the information that I have on my page is slightly larger than one page wide, I want it to be scaled down so that it does fit on one page or two pages, etc. Same thing with the height. If I have a spreadsheet that is really a little bit more than one page, I can say, well, let's change the font size and scale it down so that everything fits on one page. Now, the width and the height work together. However, they are mutually exclusive when it comes to scale. Scale simply says, I'm going to reduce everything to 95% or 90%. And you can even type in where it says 90%. I could change that to 91, for example, with no problem. To the right of that, we have sheet options. So grid lines right now, do I want to view them? If I uncheck that box, it makes it a clean sheet of paper like I would see with Word. Depending on what you're doing, that might be just exactly what you need. And maybe working with charts, that would be helpful. But for the most part, you want to view the grid lines, and then you have the option to print the grid lines as well, which again makes a huge difference in your final product. By the same token, headings is kind of interesting. We're viewing headings right now, but when I uncheck view, look at this. I can no longer see column A, B, C, and I can no longer see the row numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So for the most part, you want to leave those on, but you have this interesting option to print the column letters and the row numbers. If you are trying to do some troubleshooting, that might be exactly what you need to do. And here's that option. And then to the right of that, we have the Arrange group, which is really more of an advanced or kind of optional kind of thing. Let's look at the Formulas tab. And as we look at it, you'll notice that on the far left, you will have probably the buttons that you will use the most. And they are all part of the function library. Starting at the far left, you have the Insert Function button, which also appears just to the left of the formula bar. And it allows you to get to a wizard where you can then write a function or find a function if you're not familiar with exactly the math that you want to do. To the right of that, you have the AutoSum button. Now, we also saw AutoSum on the Home tab, but let's see what that does. I have a column of numbers here, and I'm just going to click in C13. I'm going to click on AutoSum, and look at that. It automatically puts in the sum function for me. It is saying, okay, so do you want to add all of those numbers that are in C1 through C12? Oh, yeah, I do. So all I do is press enter, and I get an answer. That AutoSum is just amazing. Now, to the right of that, we have other categories here, recently used. So it keeps track of the functions that you have used, and then it has the main categories of the functions you're most likely to use. To the right of that, you have defined names, which is more of an intermediate or advanced idea, where instead of using cell references, you give ranges of cells names and then use those names in your functions. To the right of that, we have formula auditing, and for the most part, this is advanced as well. However, if you need to do some troubleshooting, be sure to check out trace precedence and trace dependence. To the right of that, we have the calculation group. And while you won't use the calculation group normally, if you work for a company that has huge workbooks, it is possible that you will want to go into the calculation options and turn off automatic calculation because it is taking you 5 to 10 minutes to open a workbook because there are so many calculations that are going on in this large amount of data. And so you can change it to manual, and then you can decide if you want to calculate the entire workbook now or if you want to only calculate a specific sheet. And that is, again, only for huge amounts of information that may be coming in on a workbook. Moving on to the Data tab, again, a lot of what we see here is more advanced than what a lot of us would use on a daily basis. However, a couple of fun things here are in the Data Types group. And with data types, I can type in, for example, a stock abbreviation, and this is for Apple, and then I can click on the Stocks button. And when I do, first of all, it gives me several different places where Apple stock shows up on the different exchanges, and I'll just go with the NASDAQ one. And then I get this little button with a plus sign, and when I click on it, I can say what kind of information I want to see and have included in my spreadsheet, which is just pretty darn interesting, isn't it? Let's see, previous close, and here it is. Now I can also type in a city name, for example, click on that city name, and then in the data types, I also have geography. Right here on the right in the data selector, it gives me information about Kansas City, and I can even say, well, I want to know about the city, or I want to know about the county that it is in. Let's go with Jackson County, and now I have all of this information, and I can click on select, and again, I get this little drop down, and I can insert data from that information. I'll just say, oh, I want to know the area. Now, to the right of the data types, I can sort and filter. And this is probably the other section that you are going to want to do the most. So first of all, we can sort on the left, and it's more advanced than the sort on the Home tab, as is filter, which is also more advanced than what we get on the Home tab. But here, for example, I could look at a list, click in it, and then click on my sort button, and I can even decide, well, I want to sort descending or ascending, either way, and I'll just go with ascending, and I have sorted this out. Isn't that amazing? Or I could say, you know, I want to add a filter here, and I can filter by the zip code. There's a lot more to it than that, but you can see how sorting and filtering can really help. Going to the right of that, these data tools help you find duplicates and delete them. You can separate different kinds of information that's in one cell that should be in several cells instead, but these are more advanced options for us. So now let's go to the Review tab. The Review tab adds to the functionality of what you are doing, and so whether you are worried about your spelling or maybe you need some workbook statistics, then the proofing group here at the very beginning may be exactly what you would like to do. To the right of that, we can look at accessibility to make sure that we are thinking about accessibility as we create our spreadsheets. Sometimes it's really easy to use colors that aren't very good, that kind of thing. You can translate. There's a smart lookup that will take you to do some searching online and give you definitions for information. You can add comments. Now, we had a place where we could add comments before, but this is actually a more specific, more extended way to add comments and even delete or navigate through the comments and show all of your comments. You can add notes. And then to the right of that, you have kind of an important section if you decide that you really have some formulas or information that you do not want to have anybody overwrite. And so you can protect your sheet and your workbook by using this protect group. The View tab has some very helpful information, and for the most part, you're going to be looking at this workbook views group. And you want to be sure to look at show if you find, for example, that your formula bar is missing. That's where it got unchecked. You might also decide that you want to go to the zoom section because it helps you zoom in and see things better. To the right of that is a window group, and you may not use it nearly as much, but it helps you shift from worksheet to worksheet, for example, and arrange everything the way you want to arrange it. But let's look at this workbook views because that has some important ways to look at a worksheet. So right now we have the normal view, and this is the way you would work normally. But to the right of that, you have a page break preview. When you click on it, it shows you the edge of the page and where the page breaks will occur. And you can even change those page breaks by clicking and dragging on those blue lines. Now, page layout is very similar to Word's page layout, where now I can actually see the physical edges of the sheets of paper, and I can see how all of my information is going to fit on the page, and it allows me to add in headers and footers. Of course, if you want page numbers, you want headers and footers as well. Now, to the right of that, we have the show group, and again, we can show the ruler, which, my goodness, you probably want that. Grid lines, I can turn them off or turn them on, so that's the second place to do that. Formula bar, turn that off or turn it on. And here's headings, and I can turn those off or turn them on. And then to the right of that, I can zoom in and zoom out so that I can better see what is going on with my spreadsheet. Don't forget that on the far right, you will always be able to find help. And as I click on that help tab, you can see that on the left here, you can contact support. You can give Microsoft feedback. So if you see that there's a problem, for example, you read how a button should work and then it's not working that way, or you can even show training, and with show training, it gives you a list on the right here of videos that you can watch and get some help with some basic information of how to use Excel. I've moved back to the Home tab because there's one more tab that we do want to look at, and that is actually to the left of the Home tab. That is the File tab. And File is kind of interesting in that it does not look like the other tabs at all. File is called the Backstage view, starting at the top. If you decide to click on Home, that is the same as clicking on this back button, and it will take you back to your main sheet within the workbook. Below that, you can create a brand new workbook. Below that, you can open a workbook file that you have created in the past and work on it some more. Below that, depending on the version of Excel that you are using, you can save your brand new workbook that you've never saved before, or you can save one that you are working on, but it already has a name and a location. Below that, you can print your spreadsheet and determine how that is going to look the best. And then down closer to the bottom here, you can actually just close that workbook, but keep Excel open so you can keep working in Excel. The Backstage view does a lot of the behind the scenes kinds of work that help you create your document, make sure it's in the right location, and then print it out and share it with other people. To learn even more, be sure to go to mymcpl.org/online learning for such great resources as Universal Class, Learning Express Library, LinkedIn Learning, and Udemy Business. We also premiere videos every Wednesday and Friday at 1 o'clock. If you miss a video premiere, you'll still be able to find it later when it's convenient for you. You can find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, And you can find us on YouTube by going to our MCPL MO channel.